Presentation and discussion regarding local government and county finance options. Mark Reeder and Leo Liu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. You had asked us specifically, especially during the budget process, to talk to you about community facilities districts, CFDs. And so we wanted to make sure to inform you and the public on those. We have some experts who have probably the most experience in the state on this. And but in that context, we wanted to make sure to go over, all of the other local government financing tools that are out there and options available for you. So if you would indulge us, we would like to go through that, and then we can go through those quickly. Mark Reeder from Stiefel is here, and then we can dive deeper into the CFDs if you'd like when we get to that part.
Testing. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Liu, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good morning. Thank you for having me down. Looking forward to walking you through some financing information that we hope is helpful for you as you consider to contemplate how you're going to finance public infrastructure in your county, which we know is a significant amount of money as a result of your growth. So we're here. I've got a few colleagues behind me that are going to help me with this, and we're going to walk you through this presentation and address questions that you might have. This little introduction, we hope this is helpful to you. Obviously, each budget year you're spend a lot of time with staff and you evaluate and update your capital improvement plan in the county, which is significant. And you don't have enough money to do all of them, and the county and the board has to prioritize your capital improvement projects within the confines of your budget. And so when we're asked to come into the room to advise our clients on the different alternatives, and we've been blessed to work with the county, as you know, and when the county issues some form of a debt obligation, which we have over the years working together, essentially, as you know, a bond is nothing more than a promissory note. It's nothing really more than a loan repayment agreement. And when we get in the room, our really biggest challenge with our clients is if you want to move forward with a substantial capital improvement project, whether that be a transportation, whether that be open space, whether that be for development, whether that be for pension, our public pension system, what have you, the first question we ask our clients is, what kind of budget capacity do you have within your current budget? And obviously, our counties have their hands full with their budgets because of the demands on the budget, not from a personnel perspective and, of course, service perspective and, of course, trying to complete as many capital improvements as you can. So some of our clients are blessed to have some budget capacity. Maybe they had some debt come off the books, what have you. But if they don't have any budget capacity, then we have to talk about alternative ways to raise revenues to support the capital plan. And so we're going to talk a little bit with you this morning about that, different ways in which our counties across the state can raise potential other revenues outside your current revenue to accomplish certain types of projects. So we're going to break this down into traditional public infrastructure. I'm going to address most of that. And we're going to weave in some economic development projects for your overview, which we trust is helpful. And then I'm going to ask Paul Gales to come up and talk to you about a fair number of special districts that Arizona counties can utilize to help their constituents and to help with building public infrastructure. We thought we'd put this in here. I've talked about most of this. Our counties and our cities are blessed that when they do decide to do a borrowing, the interest income when we go and sell bonds in the marketplace is exempt from federal and state taxation. That's good for our counties. And as you know, I think we've always been in the 2 and 3% range for Pinal County. We had a period of low interest rates, as you all know, but when we have issued debt for the county for various reasons, we've been really blessed to be in that 2 to 3% range, if you will. Part of that is the fact that the interest income is exempt from federal state taxation. So that keeps our cost of capital, if you will, down when we proceed with projects. The last bullet point we like to just maybe do as a reminder is if we do a big project out there and we do a bond issue and we amortize that bond issue over several years, not uncommon to do, 15 or 20 years, you know. We can go longer if necessary. Is that creates what's known as intergenerational equity that allows not only the current constituents to pay for public infrastructure projects, but over years everybody can help pay for a piece of that project. So that's one of the maybe the pros of issuing bonds in addition to getting a project done much faster than if you were to do a pay-as-you-go over a number of years. Okay, so with that backdrop, wanted to prepare this little grid for you. We've used this over the years. On the left-hand side of our grid here is all the different public infrastructure projects that the county's dealing with. All across the county, you recognize those. Transportation's huge, especially in a growing county like Pinal. Parks, recreation, and open space. That's a big issue right now of importance to our counties and to the constituents out there that really appreciate and enjoy parks and open space. Utilities. Some opportunity with utilities, but Pima County is the only county in the state that is authorized to be in the water and the wastewater business. So Pinal County is not in the business right now. I know there was some legislation approved last year that may help.
Can we interrupt you when we have questions?
Oh, please, Mr. Surrey. Yes, I'm sorry.
We have one
Yeah.
way over here from
Mr. Chairman?
Sorry. Yes.
So what would Pinal County have to do to be able to do geo bonds in water or wastewater?
Okay, I'm going to, if you don't mind, Michael or Paul, come on up. This is, I'm going to let them share with you, in case this is helpful, a little bit of background how Pima County got into business, and then your question
I'll
is.
be real honest with you. I'd been prepared all morning to ask you, how can I finance some water? So,
All right, we'll let Michael address the legal side first.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Michael Cafiso with Greenberg Traurig. I've got this long gray beard because he calls me up when he needs wise advice, so that's why I'm here. 'Cause he gets himself in trouble real easy when it comes to legal stuff. To be able to do that, we'd have to change the law. The statutes only allow counties of population, I think it's over 1.5 million right now, so you guys are getting close, but 1.5 million to be in the wastewater business. So we'd have to both change it to change the population threshold and add water. So right now it's municipalities only that are in the water business. Sewer is only counties over 1.5 million, and right now Pima is the only one that's chosen to do that.
Well, Leo doesn't know this, but I was going to have a meeting with him, you folks, and some others here in the very near future because there is water available, but it will have to be financed somehow, some way. And I certainly want to put that in the forefront right now. And I guess we're only 1 million people short because we're only at 500,000 here.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm
So
sorry. Slip of the tongue there. Right.
If that's the trigger, then we need to work on that. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Chris and I would be glad to draft you up some legislation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And yeah, please interrupt me if as we go through here. So back to the grid here, obviously water, wastewater, public safety, courts. We've done that for your county. Administrative facilities, we have done that for your county. Libraries, okay, either on your own or through a library district, which we can talk about if you would like. Equipment, flood control, storm drain, a big issue in our state. So there's the ability to finance those. And then, of course, a number of detention facilities and jails. We've done that, both juvenile and adult, across the state, including Pinal. And then, of course, your unfunded pension liabilities, which we've worked with you on and continue to communicate with the county on. So that's really a list of the top 10, if you will, on the left-hand side. And up on top, these are all the financing options under Arizona law. When we walk into the room and we talk about each one of these options with our counties and select the option that is in their best interest, that's considered the most fair and what's considered the most equitable in terms of moving forward with the project. So we're going to go over some of these. Property tax bonds, general obligation bonds, yes, that's an option. We ran some numbers for you. We know you're not considering it at the moment, but we wanted to kind of share some numbers with you in the event you wanted to proceed with a general obligation bond to finance public infrastructure in your county. Gas tax bonds, HERF monies, that's a source of revenue we can use if there's budget capacity, okay? We'll get into that a little bit. The most common of which that you're aware of already, since we've worked on several transactions together, is your excise tax revenues, essentially your county budget. I got a spreadsheet for you as a quick reminder. High-grade revenue bonds that work very, very well. When we get into utilities, we'll look at WIFA as a possible opportunity as a funding source. Depending upon the situation, there's some potential grant monies there in the case of our water and our wastewater projects. Could come into play in Pinal County with your special districts that Paul's going to chat with you about here in a little bit. Library districts, jail districts, rural road improvement district. I'm going to walk you through a case study that we did 20, 25 years ago with your county to help build out the city of Maricopa under a special taxing district called Rural Road Improvement District statute. And then, of course, to a lesser extent, leases. So
you're saying a special district, is that a CFD?
Yeah, CFD and the other special districts we'll share with you are all special districts.
And we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to go through all that. Okay. So moving along here real quick. So here's your tax base. Your growth's amazing. Here's your property tax base. And, of course, every year you're growing. It looks like this year you grew at, you're pushing 9%. You're even growing more the last couple years. So no surprise here. This is just simply a history of your tax base, commercial, residential, what have you. And then the red line is how our counties set their tax levies. This is really more of a full cash valuation that the county treasurer has on the book. So kind of a busy graph, but just wanted to show you in the audience one of the reasons why you have such significant challenges on your public infrastructure, your roads, and things of that nature, obviously, is your growth. And how do we address it? Okay, let's talk about general obligation bonds. Bonds issued by a school district, a city, a town, a county, right? A community college, a variety, a fire district. An election is required by the voters to increase property taxes to pay back the bonds for specific public infrastructure improvements. Okay? We got to go to the voters in this situation. There was about $1 billion passed recently by our Arizona cities and towns on the election cycle. More difficult. Arizona's a sales tax state. You all know that, right? We're not a big income tax state, and we're not a big property tax state, unlike other states. So our revenues are generated primarily from economic development, as you know. Sales tax. That is the lifeblood of our Arizona counties, and that is the lifeblood of our Arizona cities and towns.
Mr. Chair.
Okay?
Yeah. Mark, can I just say?
You can.
Don't say sales tax. Transaction privilege tax.
TPT.
Please keep
Thank you.
that.
Okay.
Because we don't have a sales tax here. Okay, just.
Okay. TPT.
Another
Okay.
question, Mark, real quick?
Yeah.
How about personal property tax? How does that weigh into, that's a big deal in,
Yeah.
I think, the county coffers, if I'm
Yes.
correct.
That is included in your tax base
Okay.
to help if a county were to have a general obligation bond election, some of the personal property tax under the statute would be included in your valuation.
Okay.
So you get to tax that
Okay.
a little bit. Okay. So general obligation bonds in Arizona, not the most popular method. And if a jurisdiction decides to do it, it's got to be very carefully planned out with tremendous amounts of communication with your colleagues, with your constituents, obviously. Okay, so under Arizona law, the Constitution determines how much a jurisdiction can bond for with property taxes or general obligation bonds. And in the case of counties, it's a real simple math formula. It's 15% of your net full cash value. So your current net full cash value up on top is $5.4 billion. I'm rounding. And we plug in 15% on $5.4 billion, your county has no general obligation bonds outstanding. To my knowledge, Pinal County has never pursued a general obligation bond in its history. I could be wrong, but I don't believe they have. So that's $800 million of constitutional debt capacity that Pinal County could pursue. Obviously, you wouldn't pursue all $800 million. But that's your statutory limitation. All good? Okay. So now let's do some hypotheticals. This is a nice little, seven bullet points here. We mentioned that it does require voter approval. It can only be held in November of each year. Okay, just like with the schools and the colleges, et cetera. And it has to be called by our city councils and our boards, and generally speaking, in June or July, to call the election and then move forward with the election process. It's paid through a secondary property tax levy. You have a primary property tax levy now for the county that you use for your budgetary purposes, which is great. And the amount of taxes paid by residents is a function of two things: the tax rate, I'm going to show you an example in a moment, and the value of my property. We might have some people in the county that have 5 properties. They may have an agricultural property. They may have a residential property. So it's called ad valorem, and it's based on the value of the properties that we own and the tax rate. I would say number 6, it's been limited in Arizona. To my knowledge, Pima County is the only county that has pursued and was successful in passing some general obligation bonds. I have done some general obligation bonds for library districts that have passed. But outside of Pima County, and I'm thinking, because we work all around the state, that would really be the only one that we're aware of. Back in 2018, they passed a $430 million bond. Okay? Transportation improvements and various public infrastructure. Okay, so a lot of numbers here, but we ran a number assuming a Pinal County $100 million general obligation bond, and let's say it would be used for transportation. And I know there's no plans to have a general obligation bond election. I want to make that clear, but we hope this information is helpful for you. Okay, so when we issue $100 million in bonds, and we sell the bonds at 4.5%, probably in the 3s, but let's go with 4.5%, and we amortize those bonds really over 20 years, you can see the debt service would be about $7.8 million per year that the county would levy for and repay the bondholders through a tax rate estimated at 22 cents per 100 down at the bottom of column 7. Okay? So level debt, $7.8 million. That stays fixed. Obviously, the tax rate will be adjusted each year based on the growth in your assessed value, but we were very conservative there in column 3. We didn't assume any growth, but we know you're going to get significant growth, and we're calculating 22 cents per 100. So if I take the 22 cents and I plug it into a valuation of residential property up here, and as you know, property taxes in Arizona are fairly complex, and there's different assessment ratios for residential, for commercial, and for agricultural and vacant property. Okay, so we have to break them out. So on the residential, we calculated that the average value of a home, now this isn't market value, but what the county has as a full cash value, the average value of a residential home within your county is about $151,547. Okay, now we know in Pinal County you have homes that are way more than that, and you have homes, of course, that are less than that. So we just took the average value off the county and the state numbers. Okay, so let's go with it for now. So based on an average price on a $100 million bond, it would cost the average taxpayer $2.88 per month to support a $100 million hypothetical bond election example for Pinal County. Okay? Not bad. And again, I know you don't have any plans, but not bad. If somebody lived in a home that was $250,000, then they're going to pay $4.74 a month because, as I mentioned, the value of their home will result in them paying higher taxes. That's why it's not always totally fair when it comes to property taxes, but that's the way the Constitution was set up. Okay. And then, your commercial pieces, et cetera, and then your ag and vacant are down here below. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm going to pause there. Yes, please.
Reader, just a quick question. So you assume no growth in that previous chart? That's your conservative side. And if we have growth that continues on at 6-7%, it's going to bring that tax rate down because we're going to spread that.
That's right.
Cost over. Okay.
That's right. So yeah, for example, if your commercial and industrial properties continue to grow here in the county, that's going to be a huge. You can see here 9% this year, and then 0% thereafter. So yeah, that would drive all this down. Okay. Any other questions on this hypothetical $100 million example? Was this helpful? Okay. Mr. Surdy, all good so far? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We put some statistics in here. We went back from 17 to 23. And you can see we had $1 billion here in November of 23, and 96% of the general obligation bonds were passed across the state. Now, kind of what's happening maybe with cities and towns is that the legislature is going to come in and try to adjust revenues, as you all know, such as the rental tax and the food tax situation that was last session. If that starts to creep in, and our cities and towns, by way of example, receive less state shared sales tax revenues, okay, for their ongoing budget, then I would guess that more cities and towns and maybe even counties are going to have to pursue this option if the state shared revenues start to. That's why we're always keeping a very close eye on that. I know the counties are as well. Okay. So these are the various bond issues. Hope this is helpful. These are the various projects, wide variety, transportation, affordable housing, parks and open space, utilities, public safety, of course, parks and rec. This is how K-12 finances all of their public infrastructure. You've all voted for your school bonds. The state does not give our schools money for capital under the formula, and so our K-12 public schools carefully are required to go out every, call it 3, 5, 7 years to get some authorization for improvements to their schools.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may. Mark, what's the connection to affordable housing and geo bonds? Where do they use that money? Or do you know?
Well, the affordable housing, that's a tricky one. And we've only seen really one of them in which a city had a separate ballot question for X amount of dollars. The proceeds of the bonds with the property tax would be used to aid and assist in various types of affordable housing projects. And it's all kind of still coming together. Whether that takes foot as a potential alternative, depending upon the community, remains to be seen. But we did see this last session.
Okay. Can you share which community that is so I can monitor it myself?
Flagstaff had passed the.
Because I'm curious if they use it for the stick and brick, or do they use it on the financing side? Do they use it to subsidize the interest?
I think. Great questions. I think all that is in the process of being determined. The interesting thing about it is that the ballot question passed in that particular community because of their situation up there. And how they're going to parcel out and allocate, I think, is all kind of still in process of determining.
Okay.
what's fair and, you know, what makes the most sense. And
That was a city bond? City?
yeah, it was.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So we talked about general obligation bonds. This is really our revenue bonds, the TPT. And this is the one that is most commonly used by all of our counties throughout the state. Very efficient, high-grade credits like Pinal County, AA plus, good stuff, fairly easy to structure all in all. And we've done this for you several times. Does not require voter approval under Arizona law. And so counties like that in terms of having some control to move forward with projects as long as they have the budget capacity or a revenue stream in which to support it. So we like this option. I think we updated this in your books, but here's your pledged revenues. This is the TPT, right, that we talked about, the excise taxes and our state shared revenues, right, that our counties participate in. And remember, they net out your Altex and your access, so we can't use that. We've got to net it out. But you can see the net state shared revenues here. And then over the years, we've added vehicle license tax, a substantial revenue stream for our counties, cities, and our state. I just paid mine, and it wasn't cheap. So your county is over $100 million. Angie updated these for us. And your local county revenues are growing because of your growth. And so when we get in the room with you, and if we were to issue in the future some form of excise tax revenue bonds, of course, we would update this and talk about the other topics that we went through. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on HERF bonds, street and highway user gas tax bonds. You all get a state share of HERF bonds, and you use that gas tax for your budget to improve your county's roads and improvements, right? There is a provision in Arizona law that if a county would like to leverage or use part of those revenues for a debt service payment, counties can do that. Again, it gets back to the whole budget capacity situation, right? But if a county had some excess revenues that they could use for a bond payment and present value a larger transaction to get some economies of scale on the construction side of the equation, then that is allowable under Arizona law, but it does require a vote, 50 plus 1%. It's not a tax increase. You're simply seeking approval to utilize a portion. There's a governor on it, so we wouldn't use them all. A portion of your HERF revenues to pay for a bond payment to initiate a larger construction project. Okay? Haven't seen this used a whole lot. Pima County has used it down in their county. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention. A lot of counties are not doing it because you can use the revenues to make a debt service payment on your excise tax revenue bonds if you would like. You just can't pledge the revenues. So, you know, a lot of counties would go that route, avoid the election, unless you wanted to, of course. But if you had extra HERF monies, the idea would be to use the excise tax revenue option that we just talked about, okay? Do a bond issue, but use your HERF revenues to help pay for that bond issue rather than from the county's general fund.
You're making Joe Ortiz squirm in the back. I can see him right.
Angie, too, so I have to be a little careful here, okay?
Excess HERF funds is an oxymoron, I believe.
Yeah,
True.
Okay.
That's the challenge.
kind of like a contribution with access and all that and all.
I did do one for a city 30 years ago. I'm getting a little long in the tooth here, where somehow the city had a bond, HERF bond election, and it passed, and then found out later that some of the money went up to pave his street up on the mountain, so that didn't go over very good. All right, just trying to throw a little humor in here. Okay, all good there? Okay, so a couple case studies. 2006, time flies when you're having fun. The county, Pinal County, had an interest in improving Ironwood Road, Gansel Road. And Leo and Angie and Joe and other people will know more about this than I do, but I think there was some state money in this, and I think there was some county cash in this, but the county was in need to sell $63 million of these excise tax revenue bonds we've been talking about to finance this project. Okay? Much needed. There was some fatalities, as you all know, a lot of tough stuff in a growing county, and I think if you were to ask staff, I think this all in all went very well. Now, when we did the transaction, we pledged those revenues that we normally do, the $100 million I shared with you, to lower your rate. We always want to keep your cost of capital very low, but it's my understanding too that some of these debt service, if not all of it, was paid from some impact fee revenues, and so that was kind of nice. To utilize that source of revenues as a way to help pay for, your growth. Okay? Okay, I'll pause there. I wanted to just kind of go through a quick case study there with you, talk about the HERF bonds, case study on excise tax revenue bonds relevant to Pinal County. And before I get into the next case study, any questions so far? Okay. Mr. Surtee, you're good?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this was an interesting transaction for Yavapai County. A while back, 2007, and they had a significant health and safety problem with Highway 260. So as you guys know, when you're heading to Flagstaff and you start approaching Camp Verde, Highway 260 is the east and west corridor. If you go right, you go to Camp Verde, and if you go left, you go to Cottonwood. Okay? Single lane road, significant health and safety issues. And it was on the ADOT 5-year capital plan. So ADOT has a 5-year CIP, as you know, and I think it moves around a little bit. But it's always been our understanding that if a client or if a county or a city is on the 5-year CIP, it's pretty good money. I don't know that it's contractually guaranteed money, but from a practical standpoint, as we understand it, you can rely on that revenue coming in. It may be 1 year, it may be 3 years. So Yavapai County was extremely anxious to get going on this project. And they were willing to advance or maybe to do an upfront financing to start accelerating the construction. So we went to the legislature and we incorporated into law what we call demand highway construction advancement revenue bonds. So very similar to the revenue bonds that I just described to you. No voter approval was required. The county was a very good credit, and they wanted to issue $26 million so they could advance the construction and the engineering of Highway 260 and accelerate that project due to the unfortunate fatalities and health and safety issues they were dealing with. So we did this financing. We raised $26 million. We wired the money to ADOT. We paid interest. I think the interest was 1 or 2% at the time. The county was paying the interest. And we put the bond money to work with interest earnings during the construction period to offset it. So it was all in all a fairly minimal cost to Yavapai County to do this bond issue, raise some money, advance the money to ADOT, and accelerate their construction. So this is still on the books. And if a county would like to utilize this as a way to accelerate it, that's another option for us as we get in the room. Questions on this highway acceleration demand note alternative? All good? It's a pretty nice road now. I was just on it. It's largely 4-lane with roundabouts. Okay. We have the privilege of representing the Pima County Regional Transportation Authority. Over the years, and they're coming up on their 20-year sunset. They've been around about 20 years. Time flies when you're having fun. It was formed by the county, approved by the voters, similar to your situation down here, with a 20-year half-cent sales tax. and a capital improvement plan working closely with the cities, the towns, the counties, and the Native Americans. Okay? And so I would say that this has been, from my perspective, we issued almost $300 million of revenue bonds off that sales tax that they used to accelerate projects. They didn't leverage all the money, of course. And a lot of projects got done in Pima County. And I would say, and I went to high school in Tucson, I went to the University of Arizona, I spent some time in Tucson. When I drive down there, I've really seen some nice improvements from a regional perspective. And I think there's some differences of opinion on that, of course. But I know that the board's aware of this RTA, and we just wanted to share with you a little bit of our involvement with the authority and kind of our perspective. So this has worked out, all in all, pretty well for them. Okay. So any other questions really on kind of our traditional public infrastructure improvements that you might have? I'm gonna dive into CFDs a little bit because I know that was one of the requests, and then Paul will come up and talk to you about the other special districts in case that's helpful to you. Okay? So community facilities districts. Okay? A living, breathing political subdivision formed by our counties, formed by our cities. Okay? Primarily by, we would say, master plan community developers and public home builders. And we call them CFDs in Arizona. They're in virtually all the high growth states, and it allows a developer to recoup some of their public infrastructure improvements on a tax-exempt basis, thereby enhancing the public infrastructure within their communities. Theoretically, and lowering the purchase price, although that's subject to debate. So they've been around in Arizona about 25 years. We've done a lot of very successful CFDs. If you look at the second column there, with respect to counties, Pima County is the only county in Arizona that has formed a community facilities district. Rocking K on the east side of Tucson out in the Vail area, if you're familiar with that, and a relatively new one called Wildflower. We have had discussions in your county over the years with some business entities, but heretofore we weren't able to really come together on those CFDs for various reasons. They're tricky, they're pretty complex, but if you have the right people in the room with the right project and done in a reasonable and measured manner, they can be a nice tool in the toolbox. And I'm just speaking as a practitioner in the state and essentially working on CFDs virtually every day across the state. Types of project, master plan communities, but we have done some commercial and some economic development, and we've also done some pretty interesting utility type projects. I'm going to walk you through here in a moment. A CFD, if formed, has the ability under state law to issue general obligation bonds, property tax bonds for, generally speaking, more of the regional infrastructure improvements. And they also have the ability to issue special assessment bonds, which is really more for the in-tracts or really more for utilities. So that, I won't get into all the nuances of the two types of bonds, but those two are commonly used in the state. Okay, improvement districts, we're going to have Paul chat on that. I worked on a domestic water improvement district in Pima County. Mr. Miller, this is utility related. I'll just throw this out real quick, where the community, city of Tucson was having some issues with their water at the time. And there was a private water company in between Tucson and Oro Valley and Marana that was privately owned that was for sale. And the citizens in this area, I forgot how many square miles, but it was pretty significant. I want to say there were 15,000 connections, so it was pretty decent, unincorporated area. The citizens went to the county, and the leadership of the citizens went to the county and respectfully asked the board to form a domestic water improvement district. The domestic water improvement district had defined boundaries around the water company. They negotiated a purchase price with the seller of the water company. They formed their own board of directors, which was appointed by the board of supervisors. They issued bonds, and they purchased the water system from the private owner. And been around now about 25, 30 years, and in that particular case has been extremely successful. Okay?
Mark?
Yes, sir.
Real quick, that more commonly known as a DWID,
Yes.
and we have several in our county. But the board of directors for the one that was formed in Pima County was not the board of supervisors. They appointed a separate board. Did I hear that correct?
Mr. Miller, that's correct. Yes. I think under the DeWitt statute, Michael would know more than me, better than me or Chris, but I think when they're formed, the board appoints the initial board of directors, and then they go out for an election
Okay.
after that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, interesting tool, right? We've talked to some others about it. Not subject to Arizona Corporation Commission jurisdiction, as you know. A private utility that can issue tax-exempt bonds at 2 or 3%, and hired extremely talented staff that knew water very well and construction, and off to the races. Okay. So let's talk about CFDs for a moment. And I'm going to share a few case studies. And Pinal County has, in our cities within Pinal County, we have several CFDs in Pinal County, I think, as you're aware. I think we have a list here we'll share with you, including Florence, which we're right in the middle of as we speak. This one was done in 2005, and if you remember in 2005, the world was on fire. Remember? And development was on fire, residential construction was on fire, and prices were gravitating up. Remember that? And there was this term called drive till you qualify. And so a lot of the home builders and the developers were going to Buckeye. They were going to Coolidge. They were going to, outlying areas because the land was cheaper. Okay. So in 2005, the city of Buckeye literally ran out of wastewater treatment plant capacity. And they were ready to go into a moratorium. They just couldn't catch up with the growth. And home builders were just flocking out there. So the city said, no way. We're out of capacity. We need 3 million gallon expansion, 3 MGD plant expansion, and we don't have $50 million. That was the price tag. So the developers asked. There were 18 developers and home builders, if you can imagine this. We had to manage all this. But the city was extremely open and interested in looking at a community facilities district as a way to finance, on a tax-exempt basis, a wastewater treatment plant expansion and several miles of collection lines to the plant. So we formed a CFD with the city's, at the city's request. We were hired by the city to come in and help manage it and obviously structure the bond deal, sell the bonds. And we formed it around, it's kind of hard to see, but if you can see the platted, see the plats there in the middle? What's the word for them? You can see them. Let me show here. So they don't have to be coterminous boundaries, in other words. Okay, if you look on your map there, it's where all those cross references are. Can you all see those? Those were property owners who had asked to be included in the community facilities district. Okay, and we had 18, something like that. Bear with me. And they were all going to pay their fair share for this plant. That's the beauty of it. They were all going to go in, and we were going to issue $50 million in bonds, and each one of those property owners had to pay an assessment. These were assessment bonds, not the property tax bonds. And we allocated initially on a per-acre basis, and we took the $50 million, we divided it on a per-acre basis, and we allocated the capital cost of that plant to each property owner or home builder that was going to benefit from the public infrastructure. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So
So Mark,
Yes, sir.
so they didn't need to be contiguous?
No.
Okay,
Not under the statute.
okay.
We tried to get more in there because the more property owners you have, you can spread that capital cost over more folks and you kind of keep that down. So at the end of the day, we got this thing done and delivered $50 million to the city. And they, had a good contractor. They had a good engineer. Everything was being done on a parallel track. The property owners were in agreement. And we needed a value to lean there. We needed a safety measure to make sure that we had enough value in the property, which would include the public infrastructure to the property. So once you put water and wastewater to the property, as you all know, the value of that property goes up, and we needed 4 to 1. So we needed $200 million in value on a $50 million bond issue, and we were able to get that at the time we sold the bonds on a non-rated basis, by the way. These are not rated transactions because it's still based on prospective development. So there was some risk in this one.
Mark, who establishes the appraised value? Who came up with that number?
The city hired an MAI appraiser that was experienced in this area, and so a good appraiser was retained. And off to the races we went. Now we got it done. That 4 to 1 value proved to be extremely valuable for us because what happened in 2007 and 2008? Okay, the Great Recession hit. And so the value of our properties went down. Did I have a few sleepless nights? Probably. But it turned out to be an extremely resilient CFD. And the property owners and the investors who had invested in this property stuck with us. They paid their assessment because if they don't, we'll exercise our remedies under foreclosure and they're going to lose their investment. So this one has a longer story to it, but if you go out, next time you're out in Buckeye and you drive by Watson Road, if you know where that is, you'll see a extremely vibrant economic area. And I would say, and if you ask the city, that this was a big part of getting Watson Road and I-10 dialed in economically. Again, back to sales tax drives our economy. And now they got Walmarts and they got Costco's and they have discount tires and all that. So this one was a little unique, but we got it done. So I hope this is helpful. This is a tool in the toolbox. Could be used for transportation. Could be used for water. We've talked about this a little bit, Mr. Miller, over the years. And bring the property owners in who will benefit, but they're going to have to help pay.
Mark, I've been waiting to weigh in on this. I have about 4 questions, so I'm going to throw them all out there, and hopefully you're giving us every detail from the ground up. So, and I actually asked about a year ago that we look into this because in Apache Junction, the D.R. Horton project, they have that's a CFD because it's going to pay for itself, and it's a property tax, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason we wanted to look into this is because Mike's district, District 2,
Yep.
it's taken most of the needs. That's where most of the transportation is needed. Why should residents in Superior and Oracle pay for their growth? They should pay as they go. Now, the D.R. Horton one is huge, obviously a good choice for that. How small can they be? Can you do 40 acres? Can you do 20-acre projects? Can they be that? And also, it has to stay local, right? You can't raise money there and divert it to other parts of the county.
Yep.
And then, elephant in the room, Santan Valley Incorporating, can they run themselves off of their little bit of sales tax? Can they do it off of just shared revenue? They would probably need a property tax, which nobody votes for property taxes on themselves usually. Gold Canyon, it's in the back of their mind there's 15,000 people there, big enough to be a city. So that's what I wanted to throw out there and kind of pay as you go. And Apache Junction left If you look at the map, you got all that sea of blue, which is state land. As it leapfrogs, each one would be a new CFD paying for that infrastructure there so that the old parts of Apache Junction don't have to pay for the new parts.
That's right.
So that's what I wanted to get out there and get answers on.
Mark, when you answer those questions, those are great questions, Chairman. But I think one of the things that the bond proceeds that you sell the bonds, those proceeds actually reimburse the developer for the infrastructure he's put in. It's sometimes it's not 100%, it's like 80%, 70%. So that's the idea, is that the developer's upfront cost gets reimbursed early on.
Yes.
And I disagree that it lowers the cost of building, but that's a different debate.
Yeah, we could have fun. So
I think that link gets lost in all the discussion.
So I don't want to get in the weeds too much, and Chairman Sturdy would certainly want to address your questions as best I can, okay? On the Watson Road, unique one that we did, this one was actually done on a present value basis. So it was a city public works project, which is nice, and working closely with the development community. They awarded a construction contract, and they went vertical, okay? I would say, to answer your question, most of our CFDs, and really what we prefer, okay, none of us want any of these CFDs going bad, right? We don't want any transaction, any special district financing to go bad. They're very tricky, and so you have the right people in the room, and you have conservative policies and procedures on what you will do and what you won't do. Okay, because we do have developers showing up at our cities and towns and counties, and it's not something that our cities, towns, and counties want to entertain. Depends on the project. But to answer your question, Mr. Miller, what generally happens, and I'm trying to get to your Apache Junction project, which is Superstition Vistas, which is a phenomenal project. I'm sure you agree, Mr. Chairman. It's just quality development with quality developers and quality home builders. Similar to Merrill Ranch over here, right? Pulte, quality people, extremely professional. They know how to build, and they're reasonable people. So what we generally do, and this is probably be the case in Apache Junction, Mr. Surdy, as I understand it, is that the developers will invest hundreds of millions of dollars in the public infrastructure, right? And when you drive into those developments, the infrastructure is amazing. It's like Merrill Ranch. You drive in, you got wide streets, you got nice landscape, you have parks, you have open space, you have libraries, all that's really good quality development. And so in the case of Superstition Vistas, they have a property tax that will help pay for the regional side reimbursement once the tax base is grown, so you don't have any development risk, right? That's the ideal CFD for us, and that's what most of the public home builders out there want. They're okay because they have the capital, right? They have investors, and they are plowing capital into the ground, and they're increasing the value of their development. And as the properties and the homes come on the tax rolls, we have a tax base and we have a revenue stream. We'll sell bonds against the revenue stream within a specific tax rate. We don't want to get that tax rate too high. That's where it sometimes gets a little tricky. We have to balance a tax rate, our policymakers, and our staff against what the developers would like. But then come together and issue bonds, as you mentioned, Mr. Miller, and then in this case, in Superstitions, they also have an assessment bond on a per lot basis to help pay for some of the in-track public infrastructure, similar to what Merrill Ranch does at about $3,500 per lot.
So what I wanted to get out there, because citizens are watching us live and they will watch this taped as well, and then they'll spread the word, is Apache Junction and a lot of cities have always prided themselves on not having a city property tax. This will be a property tax within the city, but the people buying there, they know it going in. They're going to have a tax that the rest of the city doesn't. If they don't like it, they don't have to move there, but they'll then pay for themselves.
That's correct. This district was formed, I guess it's 2790, 2,800 acres, right? Defined boundaries outside the city limits, if you will, inside the city limits, but only the people that live in here are the only ones that would pay that property tax, Chairman, and the only ones that would pay that assessment per lot because they benefit from that public infrastructure. The people that live outside of the city have no property tax statement on their property, no property taxes or assessments on their tax statement that comes out twice a year.
Mark, on the requirements, it doesn't have to be a section of land, 620 acres minimum for a CFD?
No.
Used to be.
There's no,
I
and
thought there was
Michael come up here and yell at me, but to my knowledge,
Because
there's
I wanted to do 40 acres, and Larry Raines threw me out of his office. But
yeah. I would say we're working on one down in Marana right now, and I think that one is 278 acres. Generally, they're larger. This one, and AJ, of course, is 2,800 acres. Merrill Ranch, District Number 1, is 5,000 acres. That'll be a master plan community built out over the next 30, 40 years. So most of them are larger by nature, but if there's a specific project that makes sense, we could always talk about it.
okay.
Okay, Mr. Surtees, you had 3 or 4 questions. I know we've been bouncing around, so did we address most of them for you?
So this is not, I mean, we could spend hours talking about incorporation, so I just wanted to mention that. And then it has to stay local, although people visiting your community would get the benefits, but the people right outside would not pay.
Right.
But they also don't get any of the money sent their way either.
That's right, yeah. I mean, our CFDs don't really have, the only thing they have is a property tax levy to pay the bonds, right? There's a maintenance and operation tax of 30 cents, okay? And they get special assessment revenues, that's it. And those revenues come in, they have their own audits. They have, of course, the board of directors, of which is our city councils, or in the case of our counties, our boards. That's what we generally prefer for control and doing the right thing. But there's no other city revenues, county revenues, state revenues of any sort that would go to a CFD. Okay, so just to wrap this up here, so there was our Watson Road, and then this was a commercial interesting project we did for the city of Phoenix.
We still got a quorum. I'll be right back.
That wanted to redevelop Park Central Mall. Does anybody remember Park Central Mall? Anybody been around long enough? Park Central Mall? Mr. Kavanaugh? No. Well, here it is. This is Central Avenue. And this was a first, as I understand it, the first outdoor mall in the country back in the day. And it went into disrepair, and a developer purchased it out of bankruptcy, and they wanted to, and the city did, wanted to redevelop the property, right? Property wasn't generating what? Much TPT. Our cities like TPT, so the city was anxious to redevelop this property with a quality and well-capitalized developer, and went to the city to form a CFD for the purpose of financing a parking garage, 2,100 space parking garage. And they put it off over to the side, and they got rid of surface parking, right, because of the heat. Let's get rid of surface parking. Let's increase the density of this 40 acres, and we're going to bring in a medical school, Class A office space, a hotel, townhomes, high-quality retail. And I was there 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it is a bustling redevelopment project. And the city, they were assessment bonds payable by 7 different property owners on there. They all paid their fair share for the parking garage. And the city did give them some rebate on sale on TPT as a way to offset the assessment. So that was a negotiating point that I think worked out. And So pretty cool project. Wanted to share that with you. That's more on the commercial, industrial side. Here's Merrill Ranch, which, as you know, has been successful here in Florence. There's 2 districts, District 1 and 2. Number 1's here. 5,000 acres, getting ready to go to the next level. So that's been all in all successful, with certainly their property tax rate about $325 in their assessment as well. There's our superstition. Here's Maricopa Rural Road. This was a public-private partnership at its best, as the developer was trying to incorporate Maricopa, right? There were a wide variety of interested parties, including the Native Americans, ADOT, some federal money, some county money, I think, as I recall. And then the developer and we all went down to the legislature to pass what's known as the Rural Road Improvement District Act, that formed around private property that would benefit from this road. And we issued general obligation bonds in this case to help fill the funding gap on the various capital stacks, they call it, to punch 347 out to Maricopa. So here's kind of a CFD, I guess. It's similar to a CFD. I don't know that we had CFDs back then. Michael would remember. So maybe we did this as a way to bring in the private sector to help pay for some of this public infrastructure, along with the federal, state, Native American, I think a little bit of county money in there. So this was a pretty cool project. And as you know, they need to expand this once again. And I know they're working on it and trying to come up with the funds. Here's all the CFDs within our county. You all recognize these. So what do we got? 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 CFDs in Pinal County by the various cities here that we've worked with. Okay. I know that was a lot. I hope, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you found that to be helpful. I know you were aware of a lot of that, but can I answer any other questions you have? And if not, Paul was going to come up and just give you a 5-minute overview on special districts.
Looks like no questions.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to continuing to work with you and help you with your help you identify solutions to some of your challenges and your opportunities. So we appreciate that. With that, Paul, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Paul Gales with Greenberg Charg. I appreciate Mr. Reeder warming you up for an hour with all that interesting information. I appreciate your patience. I'll try to make this quick. Some of the special districts, the most common we see used are community facilities districts and improvement districts. There are others with which you guys are familiar, domestic water improvement districts. Sanitary districts are another. These are formed to own, operate, construct sewer systems. They issue bonds payable from special assessments or property taxes, kind of like a CFD. You need an election for the property tax aspect of that. They can also enter into loan repayment agreements with the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, so there is some low-interest borrowing opportunities there. Pinal County has a couple that we've listed here at the bottom. Jail districts, another special district that is available for counties. These are formed kind of like an RTA. You need to have an election to form them. You need the district plus the revenue source. So you need both of the questions to pass, just like an RTA. You can have a property tax or a transaction privilege tax for that purpose. We see some of these formed around the state. Yavapai County has done some of these recently. Navajo County has talked about jail districts. Again, correctional facilities improvements, maintenance, operation, and payable from property tax or a transaction privilege tax. And then the last one we wanted to hit on, Mark had mentioned county free library districts. They can be formed to make provision of library services available to library patrons on a reduced or free basis. They can issue bonds as well. Those would be payable from property taxes. You need to have an election to authorize those bonds, but that's the last of the additional special districts we want to talk about. Again, appreciate your patience, and any of us are available for questions on any of those other districts.
And you kept it under 5 minutes. That's cool.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Trevor.
All right. So, Leo, that's everything on that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Presentation with Wilson and Company of the Sun Corridor and Regional Transportation Plan.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for taking the time this morning. I'm Tara Harmon with the Public Works Department. The Sun Corridor Metropolitan Planning Organization provides transportation planning services to the communities of Casa Grande, Coolidge, Eloy, and rural portions of Pinal County, covering nearly 1,100 square miles. With an estimated population of 120,000, the current Sun Corridor MPO Regional Transportation Plan was adopted by their board in March of 2020. Since the Sun Corridor MPO planning area is within Pinal County's non-attainment area for PM10 and PM2.5, a new RTP must be completed every 4 years. Therefore, the Sun Corridor MPO is updating their current plan to develop an investment strategy for transportation improvements to keep pace with the region's population and employment growth over the next 25 years. The updated RTP documents performance of the current transportation system relative to regional and local goals, identifies needs to address existing and future travel demands, and recommends how funding for transportation improvements should be invested in region over the next 25 years. Recommendations are devised based on identified priorities and feedback from stakeholders and the public. The RTP 2050 plan is scheduled to be completed in March of 2024. And now I'm going to invite Amy Moran with Wilson & Company up to provide you with an overview of the ongoing plan updates.
Thank you, Tara. Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Supervisors, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. I think Tara did a great overview. I am not going to be able to do a 5-minute presentation, but I certainly don't think we'll be here for an hour. So bear with me for a little bit. If we could get the presentation up on the screen, please. Okay, so today I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about the overall objectives of the Regional Transportation Plan, some of those performance metrics that Tara referenced in her introduction, hear a little bit about what we have heard from the outreach we did with this public and stakeholders, and then just talk about where we landed right now with that recommended investment strategy and how that relates to some of those projects of opportunity for the region. So generally speaking, we need to make sure as we go through this planning process that we are addressing all of the federal regulations. This is a federally mandated document from the Sun Corridor MPO, so we need to make sure that we're doing that. In doing so, we also want to make sure that we're incorporating the Arizona Department of Transportation performance targets. Those are also federally mandated. The ADOT is required to produce those. And generally speaking, most of the MPOs in the state look to adopt those same targets to help inform the development of their regional transportation plans as well, and that is the case with the Sun Corridor MPO. As I mentioned, we, of course, wanted to engage stakeholders in the public since they are the ones that are ultimately using the transportation system and services in the region, making sure that we're addressing multimodal transportation priorities. So it's not just a roadway-focused plan. It looks at all modes of transportation, so bicycle, pedestrian, transit, freight, aviation. Again, the recommended investment strategies, how do we think that money could best be allocated, the money that's being directly obligated to the Sun Corridor MPO. Of course, Tara mentioned the air quality conformity for being a non-attainment, so we need to make sure that as we're developing this plan, we're also coordinating with the required air quality conformity processes that the Maricopa Association of Governments assists Pinal County in conducting annually. And then, of course, we're also going to be looking at, after this plan is produced and the recommended investment strategy is available, how are we going to define and prioritize and select projects, and so looking at that process as well. As you heard, growth it has been, I think you mentioned somewhere around 8 to 10% over the past couple of years. And so as we look at a 25-year growth, we expect to see just about a tripling in population in the Sun Corridor MPO region, and roughly the same in terms of employment growth. So we need to make sure that we're providing the transportation options, transportation routes, so that people can live and work within the Sun Corridor MPO region. I mentioned those adopted ADOT targets that are federally required. They relate to infrastructure condition, system reliability, which is just kind of a fancy way of saying how congested are things and how reliable is it if you're going to, make a regular commutes, for example, from home to work. Can you have an expectation that it's going to take you about the same amount of time every day? Freight movement and economic vitality, again, recognizing that that's a big component to not just the state economy, but also here locally. We want to make sure that we're effectively moving freight. Congestion reduction and environmental sustainability, pretty much what it says. That relates again to some of those air quality topics. Safety, of course, always important. We look at that in conjunction with this regional transportation plan. Sun Corridor MPO itself actually has recently kicked off a separate safety plan that will be taking place over the next year to help define some specific priorities there. And then, as I mentioned, multimodal. So we want to make sure that we're looking at public transportation options as well, and how is that working. The thing is, when we talk about those ADOT targets, they are really focused primarily on those higher classifications of facilities, so the state highways and the interstate, right? And as a region, of course, those are important, but we want to make sure that we're also looking at what maybe some of our more local needs are. And so because of that, as a group, we also defined what we're considering local performance metrics. Many of those sort of piggyback off what's defined at the state level in terms of performance metrics, but they're carrying down and carrying over into, for example, arterial and collector roadway and bridge conditions. So not just focusing on those infrastructure conditions for the national highway system, but what is it looking like more locally? Similarly, for those mobility topics, how are people getting around on those more local roads? Economic vitality, again, transit service and ridership. Bicycle and pedestrian, that's something that's not, very specifically addressed in the context of the state plan, but, we understand it's an important option in the region. And then, of course, just the environmental stewardship. I will say that, generally speaking, as a region, doing quite well in advancing to meeting most of those goals. So we... As we look at how we want to identify and prioritize the investment of the approximately $700,000 that Sun Corridor MPO is obligated annually, we wanted to make sure that we were talking to various stakeholders and the public to understand what they thought the priorities were. So earlier this year, we had our first round of engagement where we really focused on some key stakeholders. We talked to the public. And then we went out most recently and made another pass to get the pulse on what the current thoughts were. And I'm going to talk to you just now about what we heard from that. So when we talked to the stakeholders, and those primarily consisted of planning and economic development staff representation from the member agencies, so Casa Grande, Coolidge, Eloy, and Pinal County, as well as the Army National Guard, State Land Department, and Game and Fish. We did hear common things. New roads, of course. People are saying that it's important to have new roads. Also heard a lot about the importance of maintaining what we already have today and those needs. When it comes to roads, one of the things we heard in some part related to this concept of new roads was the need for redundancy. Right? In many cases, we have one primary corridor that's serving a majority of demand for a particular direction of travel, and we need to make sure that there are options. Can we come up with some additional routes? And some of that is going on, within the region planning today. But what we did hear is why those facilities are important, or why transportation is important. There was a lot of talk about workers. Needing to make sure that workers can get to their jobs. A lot of talk about freight, needing to make sure that could move effectively through our system here. And then as it related to workers, we also got a lot of feedback about the need for increased transit to provide a transportation option for some of those workers that may not have access to vehicles. Our first round of public engagement we used a couple different strategies, one being pop-up events. And what that really means is the communities, they have events that are already scheduled. So rather than creating our own new event, we looked for opportunities to go out and be present at those scheduled community events and look at that as an opportunity to get some feedback from folks who are already at those events. We also placed information on the buses so that folks could actually use their phones while they were taking their ride. They could scan a QR code and they could hook up to an online survey that we developed. So we had an online survey and a mapping tool. And then we also used utility bill inserts to try to get the word out to folks that this online survey and mapping tool were available. So this first round of public surveys, we got about 130 responses, which may not sound a lot, but it's actually pretty good when you're talking about sort of a 25-year plan for developing transportation. It's not like you're talking about building a road that's going to go through somebody's backyard, which could sometimes generate a little bit more response. What we heard was that, as no surprise, the greater majority of respondents, their primary mode of travel is driving their personal vehicle. It was a little bit interesting to me to see that some people identified their primary mode of travel, almost 20% of folks, as walking. That was a bit unusual. So kind of keeping that in mind and keeping that in perspective as we think about things. Primary travel purpose, work. Again, we heard work was very important. Also, a great deal of shopping, which I think is good to the TPT conversation that folks are out there. Medical and school, of course, also other important reasons for primary purposes of travel. When we asked them about a variety of sort of priorities that relates to transportation, where do we think the focus should lie? The greatest number of individuals said that we need to improve our existing road conditions. So it's good to hear, I think, recognizing that folks that live in the region understand how important it is to maintain what we already have today and to keep that in state of good repair. Also, quite a bit of feedback on the need to increase capacity of existing roads and bridges, as well as build new roads. We had, of course, an emphasis on reducing fatalities and serious injury crashes. That's something that's meaningful to everybody. And then pretty large response in the need to expand transit. So those were kind of the major priorities that were identified. When we went out to the public, again, just in the past couple of months, we attended a silent witness event at Casa Grande, a GAIN event in Eloy, and a GAIN event in Coolidge. So again, those are those pop-up events. We had the participants take part of some interactive options to provide their feedback, as well as, again, an online survey option. And for the first activity, we asked folks, we gave them 6 marbles, and there was a series of bins on the table, and we said, if you had, these 6 marbles, throw them where you think the areas of greatest importance are. So again, we got the greatest percentage of those marbles allocated to safety. I'll say once again, the Sun Corridor MPO will be doing a separate safety plan, so more to come on that topic. We got a lot of interest on environment and technology, which was a little surprising to me until we really started to think about the types of folks that were participating. These were family events, and a lot of the individuals that were participating in the activity were actually maybe high school students, college students, young families. And I think, I have children in that age themselves, and I know that the environment and technology are of huge priority to them. So I think that's perhaps why we were getting some of that. But then, we started to see then back to that common theme of new, wider roads and maintenance needs. So when we asked them if you had $100, how would you spend it? And we allowed them to put their $100 in the categories of preservation, which would be maintaining your current transportation services and infrastructure, modernization, so kind of bringing what we have up to a better quality. That would include some of those technology aspects, and then expansion, which is the newer, wider roads. We actually saw a pretty even distribution for importance there, so it's roughly about a third, a third, a third. Did you have a question,
Yeah, Mr.
Supervisor
Chair.
McClure?
Yes, Ms. Moran, in technology, what
does technology mean?
What does that mean? Yeah, could
Okay.
you circle?
Sure.
circle
I'll give you an example. So technology. If you have a road that you travel on frequently, and you might see like a variable message sign overhead, right, that will tell you that there's a crash ahead, use an alternate route, or there's paving ahead down to one lane, just so that people are informed. That's one example. Another example might be if I think in Casa Grande I've seen they have the pedestrian beacon crosswalks. So it's those lighted signs that are activated by pedestrians. That would be an example of introducing or modernizing a facility to accommodate pedestrians at a mid-block crossing location.
Help me with the environmental. They want everybody to go electric cars, or?
So a lot of the environmental was really, there was some of that, but a lot was really thinking about sort of the impact that building a new road, for example, might have, and wanting to make sure that as we're looking at building or expanding new transportation facilities, that we're taking care of the natural environment. So it goes back to some of those formal processes of are we interrupting any natural habitats, and can we do something to avoid that? So it was, I think, more of that type of environmental concern. And of course, some of it was the air quality as well.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions before I proceed? Yes.
And you said this is the GAIN event, the community neighborhood events. Is that right?
Correct.
And did you say the participants largely were teenagers?
No, I just said that there was a large percentage of the people that were participating that were more youthful than maybe when you would have a traditional public meeting and you would say, come out to my public meeting, and you get
Did the study track the ages of the respondents?
We did not. For the in-person, we didn't have anything that we were asking in terms of having them fill out that type of information. But just being there and witnessing, I myself some of the people were even 10 years old, 8 years old, and in explaining to them what some of these things mean, right? And they're like, oh, that sounds great.
Oh, okay. All right. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other before I move on? Okay. So we have that information that we glean from the public, and then we really have to look at it through the lens of, what are our needs for the region? What are our performance metrics that I spoke about? And how much money are we really getting? And this particular plan is, it's a policy-based plan. So the recommendations are essentially going to say, for the monies that you have, we recommend X percentage be slated or invested to fund expansion projects, preservation projects, and or modernization projects. And so where we landed was this 15% of funds towards expansion, 35% of funds towards preservation, and 50% towards modernization. And you might say, well, that's not exactly what we heard from the public. And so what I'll say to you is when we look at how money has been historically invested in the past, so on this graph that's on the left, those are the actual resources that have been obligated to the Suncor, directly obligated to Suncor or MPO over the lifetime of the organization. And if you look at how the money has historically been invested, it aligns fairly well with this current recommended investment strategy. What we're seeing to the graph on the right, however, is all of the regional resources. So all of the funds that have been spent on transportation, within the Sun Corridor MPO region. And so there's quite a bit of difference there that actually represents quite a bit more money. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Sun Corridor MPO and its member agencies and partners have been very successful in obtaining additional funding, be it through grants, Highway Safety Improvement Program grants, federal grants, legislative, additional legislative funding through partnership with the Rural Transportation Advisory Council, and looking at funds for some of those projects. So in reality, there's quite a more significant percentage of monies that are going towards expansion, as well as those modernization aspects. And so I think that when you look at this, Rick, and you look at the sort of regional resources, it's a good blend as it relates back to what it is that the public expressed their interest in seeing these investments in the region.
Amy?
Yes.
This is our 3 planning agencies' revenues blended together? Is that what you're telling me?
So this is the Sun Corridor MPO. So it's the projects that have been...
Just the Sun Corridor?
It is. It's
okay.
Within the Sun Corridor MPO, and it's projects that the Sun Corridor MPO has helped secure funding for.
Okay.
So it's within the region.
Okay.
Natasha, has Mr. Goodman joined us on the phone? He will be later, in case his constituents are wondering.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Any other questions related to this? Okay. So there's that, I guess, comparison that I was just speaking of as how this actual regional resources tend and trend a little bit more towards that public desire to have some additional money in that expansion category, which, quite frankly, as I said earlier, $700,000 a year, it's really difficult to fund some of these very, very large new roadway projects or even roadway widening projects. So, I think we're doing a pretty good job. Sun Corridor MPO is actually doing a fantastic job bringing additional monies into the region to try to address some of these priorities. And so I know that they appreciate the partnerships that they have with their member agencies and with ADOT and federal highways as well.
So, Mr. Chair, Ms. Morant, can you explain the difference between the public investment choice, which is they're saying, hey, you should do this,
yes,
and the recommended investment choice? Who's recommending?
So the recommended investment choice is really, it's a little bit more stakeholder driven.
Okay.
Keeping in mind what it is that the public's looking for. So if the public said, for example, we don't want to spend any money on something or other. That's not what they're saying. But if they were to say that, that would be something that we would consider. Recognizing that what they're telling us is it's all important. We need to now figure out and put that lens on of individuals who have knowledge of how transportation projects are funded, how much transportation projects cost, what the needs are in the region in terms of trying to meet those performance goals. So remember the safety, the reliability. We need to address those. We need to make sure that these roadways are safe and it's convenient as best as possible to move around through the region. So it's taking the public input and translating it and correlating it with what the actual needs are, the data-driven needs of the region.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Sort of, but I get the idea. Okay, that's good.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do you have the funds to design a really statistically valid study for the Sun Corridor area that wouldn't be anecdotal? Do you have funding for that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, the marbles and you're sort of in certain communities at certain times, but your population for this study should really include a large area and random sampling and so on to get your public investment choices. I wouldn't say that those were valid just based on the nature of the study. Do you have funding to do a bigger study?
We do not have funding available to do that level of study. What I will say is I was focusing on some of the information that we gleaned from those in-person public outreach events. We also have online surveys that are available to everybody in the region, and that word gets out through each of the member agency PIOs. There are postings in local newspapers, social media. So we do try to reach that larger audience, but as I mentioned, it's sometimes difficult to engage individuals in thinking about needs over the next 25 years. Any other questions? All right, so since it's a policy-based plan, but we know that people like to understand, well, what is that policy actually maybe someday going to help achieve, right, these monies? And so then we still identify projects of opportunity. So these are projects that had been previously identified in plans. These are projects that are required to address those performance targets, projects that are addressing regional priorities. And then something we wanted to really make sure that we included as in this comprehensive list of projects of opportunity was what projects have a potential to be a subject of future grant applications or opportunities. That particular one, because of all of the new monies and the new grant programs that are available through the Infrastructure Investment Job Act, IIJA, a lot of those applications ask the question, is this project identified in an adopted state or regional plan? So if we have that project listed as a project of opportunity within the Sun Corridor MPO Regional Transportation Plan, the answer is yes. And that already gets you that one step in, further along your way to possibly being more eligible for those grant opportunities. So I believe as part of your packet, there was a multi-page list that was provided that had maybe 100 or so projects of opportunity. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them that are described within the context of the body of the Regional Transportation Plan report. One of those being the East-West Corridor. So again, obviously a project of regional significance connecting SR 347 in Maricopa all the way over to I-10 in Casa Grande. There have been studies that have been completed on that in the past. The design concept report in 2015, and then I believe the county is actually getting ready to embark on a process to try to continue that into the next stage. And I know that the city of Maricopa has actually constructed the far westerly portion of that as well. So that would be one example of a project of opportunity. The north-south corridor, of course, that's been looked at for many years. Very important to eastern Pinal County. And there was the 2021 Tier 1 EIS. I know that there are additional studies, again, that are going to be underway here for the Tier 2 for some of the northern portions of that. So highlighting that as a project of opportunity. Interstate 11, maybe a little bit longer out. 2021, they completed the EIS for that, but certainly of importance to the Sun Corridor MPO region. And so we wanted to make sure that that was in the document as well. I-10 widening. They're, I believe, just about to finish up the DCR and EA approvals of that 2023 document, and I know ADOT has already working with some consultants to do some additional design work for portions of that corridor. Phoenix-Tucson passenger rail. Again, as I mentioned, it's not just a roadway plan. We want to make sure that we're acknowledging the importance of this potential future passenger rail corridor that travels through the Sun Corridor MPO region. This is a bit of a newer one that has evolved since the last RTP. This is that Central Arizona Parkway concept in the northeastern portion of Pinal County. It actually provides some redundancy to the adopted or identified route for the north-south corridor, which is east of the canal. This would provide a parallel option that would run west of that canal. So we wanted to make sure that we got that project incorporated into the RTP as well. A few more local ones, roadway improvements on Erica Road and in Coolidge to support the Procter & Gamble development. Hauser Road improvement between 11 Mile Corner Road and La Palma Road in Eloy. Casa Grande has need for some freight corridor roadway improvements to support some of that new development that's going on down in their industrial area to the west side of the city, south of the Union Pacific Railroad. We're also highlighting I-10 and Courtson Road interchange. That has been the subject of a previous grant application. Sunland Gin Road, this is an important project for Eloy. I know some of that pavement condition is pretty poor. And so we wanted to make sure that we addressed that and highlighted that in here. And with that, just to let you know, we're going to be finalizing this recommended investment strategy, the projects of opportunity. If you care to review that very comprehensive list that's was provided in the packet, we certainly welcome any feedback. If there's something that you think should be considered a project of opportunity and you don't see it on the list, please let us know. We have the draft plan under review presently by our advisory committee for the project, and we're expecting to get that out for public comment in Q1 of 2024. That'll be open for a 30-day comment period prior to the TAC and board approval, which is currently slated board approval in March of 2024. With that, I thank you for your time, and if you have any other questions, I'm happy to try to address them.
Are there any more questions?
Just for the sake of confusion, can you please give a brief outline of the Sun Corridor area?
Okay. Tara was just asking me to give a brief, I guess, description of the Sun Corridor boundaries. So I think as Tara mentioned in her introduction, the Sun Corridor MPO actually covers the planning areas for Casa Grande, Eloy, and Coolidge, and then portions of Pinal County going all the way down, I think all the way down to even towards Tucson. So as an example, there are municipalities within Pinal County that are not in the Sun Corridor MPO region. They're actually in the MAG region. That would be the cities of Maricopa, Apache Junction. So I just...
Florence. Is Florence also?
And Florence, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, the map's on the home page for anyone who wants to, your home page for anyone who wants to look.
Thank you.
And then CAG has a portion of this county, is right?
So CAG provides other planning activities. They actually represent all of Pinal County and all of Gila County. So that's Central Arizona governments. They provide additional community services, but they are a close partner with Sun Corridor MPO.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a 5-minute recess?
Yes.
I have
Joshua,
one thing I want to bring up about Sun Corridor.
Sure.
It's 10 years old now, I believe. Almost, right? We're going to celebrate 10 years here pretty quick. It's pretty amazing, so thank you.
And we're suffering from information overload. Is there going to be a test on this later today? Okay. So we'll take a 5-minute break. We're back in session. Item number 3, presentation and discussion of the adoption of the aquifer protection situation. Brent.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, pleasure to see you today. I was asked earlier this week to come back and discuss the aquifer protection fee schedule that was adopted by the board on November the 1st. So I've put together a pretty brief presentation that Scott and I are going to take a shot at. We'll try to go through most of these slides fairly quickly because you've already seen them before. In terms of an intro, Aquifer Protection Division's job is, in general, to protect groundwater in Pinal County. We currently have in the budget 6 full-time positions. 5 of those are filled. One of those interview is occurring, I believe, next week with respect to that. These fees are very dated in terms of when they were last adopted, which was in January of 2001. Majority of the things that Aquifer Protection does are actually functions that are delegated to us from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality under the state administrative rules. And as I mentioned before, the board approved our new fee schedule earlier this year in November. And I would point out that we did not adopt the most current ADEQ fee schedule. The timing for this project was done purposefully so that we could come to the board before the old fees expired, because the new fees are substantially higher than the old fees. So we on purpose took this through the hearing schedule to try and adopt the old fees. I think everybody knows what the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality is. This is a Scott slide.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the fee authority for the counties is set in ARS 11251.08, and it lists the standards for the county raising or increasing charges. And on top of that, 11251.13 has additional requirements if you're levying those charges or rates against a business. I'm happy to go through these with you, but there are 4 basic requirements in .08 that the county has to do in order to approve the rates. So B basically says that pursuant to this section, all the fees must be attributable to or defray or cover the expense of a product or service. So it cannot be anything more than what you're already what the costs of that service are. And before the adoption of fee or service or an additional or separate charge pursuant to this section, the Board of Supervisors shall hold a public hearing on the issues with at least 15 days published notice. I can tell you that when the board did approve this on November the 1st, all of this section 251.08 was satisfied. On top of that, 11251.13 has the additional requirement that requires the county to post on its website for 60 days any increases in charges or rates to a business. And I can tell you that that the county also complied with that provision as well.
Thank you, Scott. As I mentioned before, we operate our services under a delegation agreement from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. If we were not providing these services, and it's our choice, it's not a requirement, but if we were not to be providing these services, they would be provided by the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. The county has chosen to do this type of agreement with the state to enhance customer service. I guess before we started doing this, review time frames and customer service were far lower than are currently provided by us. I talked to the staff, and a couple of things that stuck out to me is, from what I understand, we're seen as a model for the entire state of Arizona and amongst the counties that also have these delegation agreements in terms of the knowledge and the skill of our staff, as well as the customer service that we provide. Our permitting time frames for septics are 2 to 5 days. That's for a typical septic system, and it's faster than all of the counties in Arizona. Similarly, our septic inspections are completed typically within 24 hours, with the exception of weekends, which we also believe is the fastest in the state.
So back up there. So this is one of the things of contention, I think. That fee has to be paid regardless of whether it's getting paid to us or to ADAQ, right? So we've actually made it more convenient.
That's the way that I would phrase it is we're faster, we provide better customer service. If we were not performing this service, it would be performed by ADEQ, yes.
Okay.
Similarly, under our agreement, we have the authority to establish fees and collect fees under that development agreement or that deferral agreement. You guys have seen this before. We redid it a little bit yesterday to make it easier to understand in this context. What you see in the left column there is the ADEQ fees that went into effect in August of this year. And what you see adjacent to that is the fees that we adopted, which is the old fees. This is the 22 fees for ADEQ that the board actually adopted, and you'll see that in the adjacent column in terms of what were the 22 fees. Pinal County's old fees, which were adopted in 2001, are provided in the far right column with respect to that. These are all the services that are delegated to us. They include a lot of things, including alternate septic systems, large systems with high flow, additions to existing high flow systems, addition to existing low flow systems, inspections, wells, waste haulers. There are a lot of different things that are included in this fee chart, but this gives you an idea of what ADQ's fees are, what our fees are currently, and how they relate to the old fees. And you can tell from looking at this chart, they are substantially higher from the old fees to what was adopted in November, category by category.
Mr. Chair, quick
Yes.
question. How often does ADEQ update their fees?
I cannot answer that.
You're not ADEQ, I get
I'm
that.
not ADEQ. I believe that, months ago when I had this conversation with Atul, I think they look at it every 3 to 5 years. The most current review and new fee schedule came out. It's interesting to point out that their fees went up by about 16%. The original proposal was over 30%. And due to their public process and their committees and what have you, they reduced that down to about the 16% that we see now. But the original proposal was much higher.
So, excuse me, so what I'm seeing is that we should be looking at this every 3 to 5 years when they update, that we should be doing it, rather than wait the 20 years or whatever that was.
Yes, sir. I did ask staff why it had taken so long. And understand from my perspective, I was given direction that thou shalt move forward and work on a fee study update. I asked staff, why has it been since 2001? And they said, every time we bring this up, there's a ton of opposition, it becomes a political issue, and then it gets shelved. So I think that there's been iterations of that in the past where it just became a hot button issue, and we chose not to move forward. So this is just our latest attempt.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
May I ask a question? Brent, I just want to be clear. Because the state new fees are substantially even higher than ours, our new current fees, we don't have to make that difference up. We do?
No, sir. So two answers to that question. Number one, these monies do not go to ADEQ.
Okay.
These monies stay in-house.
Okay. Well, okay, I just want to make sure that we're not making up the delta on that.
No, sir.
Okay, good. I guess if we didn't have this delegation authority, they would be going directly to the state, and the state
Yes,
would
sir.
be charging them those higher fees.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to be clear on that, make sure.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So if you could go back to the fee page. Okay, so the ADEQ fees are based on their cost structure for the state. Is that right, or do you know?
I knew I was going to get asked this question, and I actually asked a couple people, and I was told I have no idea how they how ADEQ sets the fees. They just know it's a public process that involves their committees, but I really can't answer that in terms of how they justify it.
Did you do the study that matched the amount of fee we're charging with the amount of cost associated with handling these transactions?
Mr. Kavanaugh, we were given very specific direction to utilize the state fee schedule since it's a delegated agreement. So we did not hire a consultant and do a specific fee study with respect to this item.
Okay. So in the previous meeting, you said that it's a little bit of a moneymaker. You knew that much.
It's been a money loser every year for
with
a
the
very
new
long
fee
time.
schedule. With the new fee schedule,
It could be. I mean,
if I recall correctly.
that's one of the things that's very difficult to gauge, is when you do a fee based on what ends up coming down to is a number of permits. You try to meet a nice soft medium, and I've got a slide that's coming up that's going to, I hope, answer this question. So the fact of the matter is, if we were to get 400 septic permits next year, even with the new fee structure, we would lose money. If we were to get 800 permits next year, in theory, it brings in some additional money above our calculated costs, which in theory include hard costs and soft costs. But it's, as I'll also explain, it's kind of complicated to try and figure out how much it actually costs and come up with a hard figure on the department, because it's not as simple as there's 5 employees, this is what they make, this is what it costs, because multiple divisions in development services touch each one of these septic permits when they come in. So it's a portion of people's salaries, which is difficult to calculate, if that makes sense. So hopefully I have a slide that helps you in a minute.
All right, and thank you.
And every septic tank is not all in the same location. We're
That's
countywide. I mean,
That's
size
correct.
of Connecticut. So
Yeah, over 5,000
cost-
acres, there's a lot of travel time.
There could be a lot more cost in something farther away than closer.
Yes, sir. And septic designs also very much vary based on condition. It'd be very different putting a septic tank at my house versus installing and designing a septic tank near Jeff's house. It would be a very different scenario, or Chairman.
All the soils are different, all the perk rates are different, all the...
Implementation timeline. One of the questions that came up as I've talked to people this week was, we didn't know about this. Why didn't you let us know? This slide is designed to show the amount of notification that has taken place and where that's defined. The first notification is per county policy and also the open meeting law, and that had to do with the work session that was held on the 7th. Secondarily, we're required by state statute to do a web posting. That had to be for 2 months. We exceeded that. We posted for more than 2 months prior to that public hearing on the county website. A mass email was also sent out to all of the installers and the designers that are in our aquifer protection shared mailbox. That's not required. However, another question came to me is, how do you verify that email actually went out? Well, we've got a couple of different ways to do that. We've got a copy of the email that went out. We also have a copy of the ticket that went into IT to do the connection to the notice of hearing. The third way is we also emailed it to ourselves and we received it. We're able to confirm that. The next one is we received 2 responses back that the email was undeliverable. One of those was to ADEQ and had to be sent again. Another one was to an entity in Pima County. The last way is our staff received at least 1 call from somebody involved in this that called to ask questions after the notice was sent out. But once again, that's not a required part of the process. It's just something that staff ended up doing. I didn't even know about it, to be honest with you. I found out after the fact that staff had actually sent out that email. We did contact IT to get from IT who opened the email, and when they opened the email, it's been so long ago they can't get us that information. But that was on 9/22. We then were required by ARS requirements to advertise in the newspaper. I have that actual advertisement and the notice with respect to that it went to the Casa Grande Dispatch. Similarly, we had the public hearing and the adoption per ARS and obviously our own county policy and open meeting law that was duly advertised and noticed. And then following adoption, we're also asked to do a web posting because there's a 30-day period from which you take action on that resolution before it comes active. That posting was actually done on 2 different web postings on the county website. One in the development services page as a banner, and then secondarily in terms of the new rate structure in the aquifer protection pages. The 30-day implementation period passed, and the new fees went into effect on 12/2 One of the things that I confirmed with county management to try and help folks out is that any application we received prior to 12/2, even if the permit wasn't issued, any application we received prior to 12/2 will have the old fee schedule. We did get a bunch of permits in prior to the second to take advantage of that lower fee. Any questions on this one?
A higher than normal volume
Yeah.
of permits,
Yeah.
applications.
Mr. Chair, out of curiosity, because you said based on, kind of this average of like 400 permits, it'd be so much. Are you going to have a slide that shows kind of what there we go. Okay.
Here it is. With no further ado, I actually had the finance department busy for 8 hours yesterday. Actually ended up being more than 8 hours because we stayed late last night so that we could take their findings and try to understand that and then audit that against the information from the Aquifer Protection Department in terms of number of permits received. We did that over a 10-year basis. Some of the things that make that difficult is Aquifer Protection has been part of different departments and different divisions over that time period, and up until this year was never budgeted as its own department. It's always been combined with another department, so it's difficult to separate those things out. The other thing that is difficult to discern is all of the people that participate that are part of that process that aren't those 5 to 6 employees, as well as the overhead costs associated with that. I'm not sure we've captured overhead here, but I think we've captured direct costs, just so we had something today to discuss with you guys. In terms of that 10-year period, our average permits per year are 466. Our high is 980. That 980 was actually 2 years ago. Last year, we were somewhere around 750. Undetermined where we're going to be because we're only less than half the year in terms of this year, and a low of 147. What does that mean in terms of average loss per year? We lose money on aquifer protection every year. We never collect enough funds to cover our actual direct costs in aquifer protection. Those losses range from $220,000, which is what we lost last year, to about $94,000, obviously over that 10-year period. And that accounts to the county's lost about $1.451 million over the last 10 years with respect to not collecting enough fees to cover our actual costs. Our combined budget this year, we've estimated about $660,000 to try and cover with respect to the department. Any questions, Mr. Kavanaugh? Does this slide help?
It does. I was just kind of scratching the math out. So we were on average $145,000 less than our calculated costs. But the fees then, I haven't figured out that part, but the fees are significantly more than that. So I think that's sort of the argument. My understanding was that when I voted yes on it, if we didn't pass the same ADEQ fees, they were going to get charged one way or another, the same thing. And I misunderstood that. Did we tell you to match who told you to match the fees to the ADEQ? You said your specific instructions were to...
My manager at the time said, this is a delegation agreement from ADEQ, we should be using the ADEQ fees. Okay. And that, in the context of that was, do we hire a consultant and go and do a full fee study like we're doing with the building safety fees now, and additional cost to the county and what have you? And the thought was, no, we should be using, this is an ADEQ services, this is what ADEQ charges, we should be using the ADEQ fees. The meat in the middle there was to try to time this to where we could capture the old fees before the new fees went into effect, if that makes sense.
And is there a public comment, Mr. Chairman, on this one?
Well, let me ask a question, too.
Go ahead and ask a question first.
So then, who or how did we make the decision to drop it by like 29% from the ADEQ figure?
That was at the ADEQ level, not county.
Oh, they came over to us and said...
No.
So we received the fees from the state.
Yes.
From ADEQ.
Yes.
We're going to do new fees. But we didn't adopt their exact fees. We adopted a reduced fee.
Correct.
Who made that decision to reduce them? And why?
Atul and I proposed that to try and soften the amount of the increase.
Okay.
Because if we would have
That's fair.
adopted their August fee, it would have been significantly higher. Yes.
Okay, that's fair. I'm just curious how we got the lower fee, which I think was the right thing to do. You know, and I'm just going to reflect a little bit on, over the years, gone around and around on cost for government entities. I mean, we did studies on prisoners, on how much they cost to keep, and we've done it different entities. And it is very difficult because it's not one shoe fits all, and
Right.
and every one of these inspections is slightly different from the other one. So you kind of have to just use some assumptions to get to these numbers at some point. Okay, thank you.
So this being a work session, there's not supposed to be public comment, but we know that these folks have made the trip here, and we do want to hear from them, and I think they've picked a spokesperson to represent. Now, Natasha, can we interact with them, or is it going to be like in the call to the public format?
Chairman, this item is agendized, so therefore you can have a dialogue with them.
Okay. Brent, are you finished? So,
Yes, sir. I only had one more slide, and it was not important, so I'll sit down.
okay, so,
Mr. Chair, just to be clear,
yeah.
to Mr. Miller's point, we adopted these before the old fees went out so that we could adopt the lower fees. I think that's point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let us know who you are and where you're from, and
So first of all, good morning, members of the board. My name is Jenny Vitale, for the record. I reside in Chandler, Arizona, and I'm a civil engineer by trade. One of the things I specialize in is alternative septic systems. I want the board to know who's here today, who showed up, because this is important to them. We've got Pinal Excavation, we've got Wood Excavation, Intertwine Environmental, Desert Septic, Canyon State Septic, Clark Septic. Arlene, I apologize, I don't know your last name, but Arlene is like me. She's a designer. We've also got Basic Drilling. Did I miss anybody? The reason we're here today, well, first of all, I'd like to thank staff and thank the board for the hurry-up offense to get this before you today. I know that it took a few phone calls and some time. We're here today because this is important to us. I'm going to try not to go tit for tat with what was just presented to you from Mr. Billingsley, but I disagree with about 90% of it as to how it's been presented to you and how information was both vetted, justified, and disseminated. The people in this room today are here today because we knew nothing about this. This is not an apathetic group of individuals who just goes about their business. Everybody in this room over the last 3 years has been integrally involved in the ADEQ rule rewrite for the Aquifer Protection Permit Program. Some are still on the committees. Some of us spent a couple years. Everybody has participated in surveys. So this is not an apathetic group that doesn't care what happens to septic on both a state level and a local level. We have a vested interest. These are also all small business owners. These are family-run businesses, and most of them are generational. We have an obligation to our clients when we put forth contracts and when we put forth bids to provide them with real-time information. They have a reasonable expectation that when we give them a contract and say we need to collect $296 for your permit fee, that they have a reasonable expectation that that's going to be the permit fee at time of permit. We contract with these individuals sometimes 3 and 6 months ahead of time. The way your business is modeled here in Pinal County, we cannot submit a septic permit until the building permit has been issued. To say that this came as a surprise to all of us is an understatement. I understand that staff per state statute may have met the statutory requirements of notification by posting in a tiny newspaper in Casa Grande that nobody reads anymore, or by posting on the wrong page online. We don't go to community development to look for septics. If you look at your homepage on community development, it doesn't even mention the word septic permit, aquifer protection, or well for that matter. We actually go to a different portion of your webpage. And when I was on the phone with Brent, he actually had to have his secretary come over and page through and show him where the posting online was for this new fee. He also had to have her show him where, after filing through several clicks, you could find information even on the septic department. The fees that they proposed on 9/22 when they sent out the mass emailing, some folks did get, and there was a chart. That chart showed a fee of $500 for conventional septic systems. Beyond that, none of us were notified of any additional meetings or public hearings. So I don't know what went awry. It's one thing if Jenny didn't get the email. My email's always full. Things bounce all the time. But you have a room full of people These folks represent 80% of your permit submittal. Here's the deal. You were not given correct information. Let me run some quick numbers for you. Your department has 5 employees, and it's had 5 employees for several years. It costs that department somewhere between $350,000 and $375,000 to run every year. That's your salaries, your FICA, your workman's compensation, your fleet maintenance, everything that's associated with that department. You take in somewhere between $110,000 and $150,000 in revenue, and you borrow from the general fund between $200,000 and $250,000. So your department takes between $350,000 and $400,000 to run every year. You, on average, run about 475 to 500 permits, and on this year, you're going to run darn near 1,000. Using the existing fee structure, yes, you run a deficit at $296. Nobody in this room is in disagreement that you don't need to raise your fees. You do. Courtesy of Bidenomics, we've all had to raise our fees. It's not an issue of raising the fees, it's an issue of what you did to raise them. And your delegation agreement does not, and let me be very clear on this, it does not require you to adopt ADEQ fee structure. The ADEQ fee structure doesn't even match how you do your permitting down here. Your permit fee structure is lacking a number of items that you should be charging for that you're not. You don't charge for A312Gs. You don't charge for abandonment permits. You don't charge for alterations. You don't charge for additional inspections. You're losing revenue because you're giving away freebies. You also weren't provided with something that looks like this. I took the time last night to go through every county in the state and provide you with an apples-to-apples comparison of your new fee structure compared to everybody else's. There is not a single county in the state that has adopted the ADEQ fees. You are now the highest county in the state by a factor of 4 to 10, depending on the fee. The fee chart that you approved should be null and void. It has incorrect references, it has incorrect amounts, it has incorrect rule citations. There is no, well, if we didn't provide the service, ADEQ is going to provide the service. That is categorically false. Back in the 90s, when we were all working under Bulletin 12, all of the different counties got with ADEQ and said, we want to be able to control our own septic programs. Because whether you're on the desert floor or you're up on the rim, how you do septics, how you inspect, how you evaluate soils is different. And the counties wanted ownership of that, and deservedly so. ADEQ, if you guys quit today and said, take your delegation back, you'd be screwed. ADEQ does not have the staff to even review conventional septic permits. They don't have anybody with practical application experience, and they don't even have an engineer on staff to review alternative septics. So it's not a matter of, we don't want the delegation anymore, we'll just have ADEQ and you guys have to pay the ADEQ fees. The only time you'd have to pay an ADEQ fee is if, say, all your staff got COVID and had to take off work for a month and you had to resort to ADEQ in that meantime. Then you would have to pay ADEQ fees. I can also tell you that you can't justify a single one of these fees. If you do the current permit load that you're going to do this year, which is almost 1,000 permits, at $1,200 a permit, you're going to gross $1.2 million. It costs you $400,000 to run the department. What are you going to do with the extra $800,000? Are you going to refund everybody? You don't have a right as a government agency to run as a for-profit. You have a right to cover your costs, and you have a right to have those variable for low season, high season type of numbers, but you don't have a right to net an additional $800,000. And that's just assuming everybody is a conventional septic. You do about 10% of alternatives and subdivision review. It takes your staff, and if Brent had actually talked to your staff instead of just talking to a tool, it takes your staff on average 8 to 10 hours to review a conventional septic permit. That's for Tammy to shuffle the paperwork back and forth online. That's for Dave to spend anywhere from 1 to 3 hours doing plan review and redline comments. And that's a generous 4 hours for your staff to drive to the furthest point in Pinal County, do their inspection, and drive back. 8 to 10 hours. It costs the county $50 an hour to perform that hourly rate. That $50 includes salary. That $50 includes truck maintenance and fleet maintenance and any other ancillary costs that you have. 10 hours times $50 is $500 a permit. You guys need to go back and revisit this permit structure. It is categorically in violation of item 3 on your resolution, whereas the fee amount attached to this resolution only defray or cover the expenses incurred by the county for the issuance of permits. You, staff, I should say, cannot justify a single solitary fee on this new structure. You are making money on every single fee that you're charging by a factor of almost 4 to 5. What we would like to see today, and I've been told nothing can be done today, but I respectfully disagree. Board of Supervisors, HOAs, county districts, etc., when things are not covered neatly in state statute, you guys default to something called Robert's Rule of Parliamentary Procedure. And there's actually been a test case for this in Wisconsin. And being a cheesehead, I happen to find it. And it states that agreeing to reconsideration suspends all action mandated by the initial decision until the reconsideration is completed. The matter under reconsideration must eventually come to a closure by voting on it again, either in its original or some modified form. How do you do that today? You guys simply vote to suspend the implementation of this new rule structure, set it aside to a February meeting, giving your staff a chance to properly vet and provide you with the new fee structure that they can properly justify. And we hope that you take that today under advisement, and we hope that that's the resolution that comes to bear today.
Any comments?
Mr. Miller, did you have a comment?
I'm thinking of one.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You heard Mr. Billingsley say there's an opening, and maybe you should submit your resume. You seem pretty knowledgeable about these things.
Well,
and I did the quick math, and
you.
I'm sorry? Oh, it must have been the dog. Oh. I did the math, and I see that it appears the fees do exceed our costs, and there hasn't been an in-depth study done to determine exactly our costs. So I completely understand where the speaker's coming from on that issue.
So up until now, though, it's been a losing proposition, correct, Brett? Up until now. So I see the hand up back there. I'll give you a minute or so if you have a comment.
You have to come up and give your name and whatever.
Yeah, we got to have you at the mic, otherwise we can't hear anything.
And you have to identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Alexander, Basic Drilling Company. Just really quick, the fee schedule that he posted up there and the original fee schedule we have has incorrect information. When we saw this, we read Pinal County current fee, $296. You go over here, it says proposed $500. That's what we thought. Those of us that read it and tried to read through this thing, okay, the permit went up from $300 to $500. That's fine. Maricopa County charges $550. That's incorrect. It went up to $1,200. So your regular conventional septic permit fee that we apply for all the time went from $300 to $1,200. That's what you all need to know. That's what the problem is. That's not just 16 to 30%. Your standard permit fee went from $300 to $1,200. The line above it says the current fee was $700 to $1,000, and that went up to $1,200. Well, $700 is an engineered permit fee, and so we assumed that the $700 went up to $1,200, fine, and we assumed the $296 went up to $500. That's incorrect.
Can I ask you a question? I'm a capitalist myself. For instance, trash rates go up because gasoline prices go up, et cetera. Nothing stays the same. Will you not, it'll be equal for everyone. Would you not just pass this on to your clients?
From $300 to $500 is reasonable. That's something that we could, pass on existing contracts, upcoming contracts. But to jump from $300 to $1,200, this is what we're questioning and what Jenny's thing is about. I just wanted to let you know, with all of that talk, the main subject is this is incorrect. We could not read this properly. We thought the fee was going from $300 to $500. It went from $300 to $1,200,
Okay,
and that's what you
I
need
understand
to know.
that,
Okay.
but 10 years from now, fees will be different. Will you not just adjust your rates up
Yes,
to
10
your
years from
clients?
now, yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question and a statement, I guess. But the first thing Miss Jenny, I'm sorry, pronounce your last name again for me? Vitale, thank you. Her referencing of the cost per hour, and I guess I need to know where you extracted that information from. Where would you got that? And you give me that in another time.
I'll just give it to you right now. You can Google anybody's name, any government employee, and there are 3 websites that will give you 10 years of data as to what every government employee, regardless of county, makes. And just so you know, Mr. Billingsley gave Atul an earful on Monday because he thought that Atul was disseminating information about people's salaries to me. I want to make it very clear. Atul Shah never made any reference to that. And with respect to passing along the costs, it's one thing to pass along the costs if it's a $200 increase. Yes, you're going to revisit your fees every 3 to 5 years now, hopefully, but you need to do that incrementally. Expecting a county such as Pinal County to do a 400% increase is egregious. It also is not justifiable. You can't justify the hours to collect $1,200 permit fees.
Okay, thank you.
So your reference is Google. Mr. Attorney, County Attorney, if we have contradictory information from what we posted and what we charge, I mean, have we researched that to see if that's accurate? I mean, did we post something and then charge something else? I mean, that's what I'm hearing from 2 people now.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor, that's not what we posted on the 60-day. I'd never seen the spreadsheet before, so that's not what was posted on the 60 days. I have the actual posting that went on the website, so I don't know where that came from.
Okay. Well, I want to go with the assumption that there wasn't something incorrect. County Attorney, how would we rectify that if there was a mistake between posting and then actual charges or fee, that we're charging somebody now?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Miller, let me first clarify. You can take no action at all on this item today other than directing staff to come back with you with recommendations or to do further surveys or to do further analysis and so forth, because the item is not agendaized for any type of action.
Correct.
In answer to your specific question, what would you need to do? I think we would need to take a look at that and probably have an agenda item proposed that would either rescind the action that was previously taken, and adopt a newer version or tweak those fees, with an amendment somehow, and those could be done. But it would then probably, I'm educating at this, speculating, I should say, probably have to go through again another posting and notice requirement again, so that any public has the opportunity to come in and also comment upon those changes that are being proposed or those revisions, adoptions, amendments, whatever they may be.
Yeah, because my discussions with anybody on this has been, we take the postings very, very serious. Whatever we put down is and it has to be accurate. In the simplest things, I've seen where just the verbiage was wrong on a public notice, and we had to scrap it and start over again. And so I would say that, that's what needs to be looked into, because I'm very concerned that something different was posted than what's being charged. And I guess I hope in some ways we're not wrong, that we did it correctly, but that's what I want to make sure was done correctly, is that the posting and then the actuality of the schedule is the same.
So
and I would ask that staff help us come to that conclusion as soon as possible.
My question, Mr. Chair, is everyone in the room here on our email list? Did everyone here in this? Are you on our email list?
Is there somebody here that's not on our email list?
What email list?
The one that was sent out from the county.
We can provide the email list.
On September 22nd. So the folks in the room are on that email list. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not going to talk to you across here. You can come to the podium and talk, but not across the audience. So I'm just curious.
AZEH Consulting, Basic Drilling, Bob's Backhoe, Gary Tripp, Classic Excavation, Magic 476566, Digit 72, Environmental Quality Control, Fleetwood, Granillo, Sharon Humber, Robert Cravillo, Jenny Vitale, Kathy Mills, Frank Avila, Pamela Kraus, Wayne Bolton from Redline Development. Looks like PED Drilling, Permitting Design, Mills Engineering, The site engineers, Spencer Ellington, Doug Hansen, Sunset Septic, Sandy Septic, WKW Tucson, Wood Excavation, Bill Blanchard, Melanie Parton, Clark Septic, Desert Septic, Nikki Arias Drilling, Isaac Griffin, Brandon Bilstein at American Septic, Priority Pumping, Robbie Richards, As Specialty Services. I believe that's the list.
Okay, so Mr. Billingsley, then my question would be, the posting that was placed on 8/30, the website posting, we just need to make sure that that posting has the same information as
Correct.
the email that was sent out on 9/22.
Actually, the email referred to the 60-day posting that was on the website. So it just that's why I know, is the email provided a link to what was posted on the website for the public notice.
Okay, thank you.
It's all connected.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, yes.
So I think the wise thing to do would be to receive all the information from the folks who are concerned about the fees and have this agendized next week and have a discussion about it and decide whether we need to reopen the issue of the fee or take some other action. And maybe we can talk with council about that later today and tomorrow about what would be appropriate.
And Chris, there would still be time to agendize that for the 20th.
I believe we have until Friday next week. I mean, the Friday before the meeting is what I'm saying. Yeah. So we
Yes.
have all of next week, yes, to get the agenda put together.
The rest of this week. No, we
have all of this week.
this week.
Oh, this,
And we really don't have all of this week because we post this Friday.
okay.
So we have the rest of today
Day and a half.
We can
and tomorrow.
definitely leave a placeholder to get it on there, though.
Yes.
Yeah, we can put it on there and then try to get the
Yeah.
data that would
Yeah.
support the.
Yeah, I stand corrected. I keep thinking this is one of our 2-week schedules. This is a special meeting with work session, so I was going on 2 weeks away. So Natasha I stand corrected. You have this week.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may continue.
Sure.
One of the citizens asked about taking an action today, and we can't. We're not on Robert's rules. Our rules say that if we do file a motion to reconsider, it has to be within 24 hours of our original vote. So we can't suspend the rules and do that today. That's not in the cards today.
Okay.
If I may.
Yeah, one last point.
Supervisor Miller asked if there were any errors in the posting to the paper. There are errors in the posting to the paper. And Supervisor McClure, you asked where Jackie from Basic Drilling obtained that table that she was referring to with the $500 fee. That came from the September 22nd email that went out from aquiferprotection.shared mailbox.
If you could get that into a sheet and get it to Brent, that would be helpful. You said so much, we didn't retain all of that, obviously.
No.
So get that all written, get it to Brent, and we will then consider it.
That's a public records request in a sense. I mean, we just go to IT and have them pull whatever was sent out.
All right, Brent.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same thing, that maybe there was a mistake made. That's not the information that I have that was provided by IT, but we will look into it and we'll get that out to the board as soon as possible.
Okay. I will ask for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
I believe
Second.
staff does have direction on that. I've moved on, and we're going to hopefully hear this on the 20th. And
I asked staff to look.
yes, yeah. And we just had a move to go into executive session.
I'm sorry. Chairman, I did not get who seconded that.
Kevin.
Thank you.
Yes. Was there a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We're in executive session. Could I have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We're back in session. Discussion, approval, disapproval of overtime compensation with Mary Ellen.
Chairman Surdy, members of the board, Mary Ellen Shepherd, Deputy County Manager. This board agenda item is submitted in recognition of and in response to the impact COVID and staffing shortages had on the changing nature of the work for our sworn and detention personnel over the last 3 years. It is also submitted in recognition of the demands placed on our current workforce to include the increased volume, complexity, and volatility of public safety needs in our growing county. We found through comprehensive analysis that FLSA updates were advisable and that compensation strategies already approved by this board to help with the challenges had not been consistently applied. We seek today to remedy both. This action is also important for an additional reason. We know that among key factors impacting upon recruitment and retention of law enforcement personnel in our community and in our state, 3 things stand out: support from our community and leadership, recognition of dedicated and exceptional service, and salary that makes it possible to live and work in the community and with those served. We ask your approval so that our public safety personnel know here in Pinal County, our board and our sheriff are committed to all 3 priorities, and most importantly, that we all are committed to them, our public safety personnel. And with that, I would ask this board to approve item number 5.
Any discussion or questions? If not, I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. Do we need to include the amount of the compensation? Is that in the documents that are supported by number 5, or do we have to say that out loud? Or
Chris or Natasha?
We have the acknowledgments and we have the bulk amount, and I think going into detail for each one, because it's different for every individual based on the number of hours and the assignments and so forth. So maybe just, the bulk amount would be sufficient at this point in time. I think you had that, didn't you, Mary Ellen?
Yes, Chairman Surdy, members of the board, Supervisor Kavanaugh, the entire amount to cover this compensation remedy is $1.169,604.89.
Okay, Mr. Keller, does that have to be included in the motion or no?
It does not.
Okay.
I do like the 89 cents. That's a nice touch.
Thank you.
So, a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve item 5 as presented.
A second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes, and we're adjourned.